She was 19, homeless, and breaking into an abandoned children's hospital just to survive another night. But when she pried open the morgue drawer in the forgotten basement, what she found inside wasn't death. It was $300 million worth of hope that powerful men had tried to bury forever. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the Greyhound bus as it rolled through the outskirts of Camden Falls, a town that had seen better decades. Maya Chen sat pressed against the cold glass, her backpack clutched tight against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Inside that bag was everything she owned: 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a toothbrush, $47 in crumpled bills, and a faded photograph of a woman she barely remembered. Her mother, dead 16 years now. Maya was 19 years old, though her eyes carried the weight of someone who'd lived twice that long. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that hadn't been washed in 3 days, and her jacket, too thin for November, was fraying at the cuffs. She'd been on this bus for 11 hours, coming from a group home 2 states away where she'd aged out of the foster system exactly 1 week ago. They'd given her a garbage bag of her belongings, a handshake, and a photocopied list of homeless shelters. "Good luck out there," the caseworker had said, not even looking up from her computer. "The world doesn't owe you anything." Maya knew that already. She'd known it since she was 3 years old. The bus hissed to a stop at the depot, and she stepped out into the cold drizzle. The air smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust fumes. She pulled her hood up and started walking, not toward the shelters on the list, but toward the one place she'd sworn she'd never return to. Camden Falls Children's Hospital. Or what was left of it. She'd grown up there, not as a visitor, but as a patient. From the age of 3 to nearly 12, that hospital had been more home than anywhere else. She'd spent years in and out of those sterile rooms, fighting infections her weak immune system couldn't handle, undergoing tests and treatments that blurred together into one long nightmare of needles and fluorescent lights. The nurses knew her name. The doctors knew her chart by heart. And when she finally stabilized enough to be placed in foster care, leaving that building had felt like both freedom and abandonment. Now, 17 years later, she was coming back. But not for treatment, for survival. The hospital had closed 2 years ago. Budget cuts, mismanagement, a bankruptcy so messy it made the local news for months. The building had sat empty ever since, wrapped in chain-link fencing and plastered with condemnation notices. Demolition was scheduled for January, just 2 months away. After that, it would be rubble, a parking lot, and eventually luxury condos no one in Camden Falls could afford. But until then, it was shelter, and Maya needed shelter. She reached the property just after midnight. The fence was easy enough to slip through. A section near the loading dock had been cut open, probably by scrappers looking for copper wire. She squeezed through, her backpack catching on the metal before she yanked it free. The hospital loomed ahead of her, 6 stories of red brick and broken windows, dark except for the glow of the city lights reflecting off the glass. It looked haunted. Maybe it was. Maya approached the side entrance, the one near the old emergency bay. The door had been boarded up, but someone had already pried away the plywood. She pulled it open, hinges groaning like something in pain, and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Mildew, dust, rot, and something else, something chemical and sharp that made her eyes water. She pulled her sleeve over her nose and clicked on the small flashlight she'd stolen from a gas station 3 towns back. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a hallway she recognized instantly. This was the East Wing. Pediatric oncology. She'd spent 6 months on the 3rd floor of this wing when she was 8, sharing a room with a girl named Sophie, who drew pictures of butterflies on the ceiling tiles. Sophie had died that winter. Maya had been moved to a different room the next day, and no one ever mentioned her again. She walked slowly, boots crunching on broken glass and crumbled drywall. Gurneys sat overturned in the halls. Charts and paperwork were scattered across the floor, patient names still visible under layers of grime. She passed a nurse's station where the computers had been gutted, wires hanging like veins. The walls were covered in graffiti now, tags and curses and declarations of love that would outlast the building itself. But as she moved deeper into the hospital, something started to feel off. The air was different here, cooler, cleaner. She ran her hand along the wall and realized the paint wasn't peeling. The floor wasn't littered with debris. It was almost like this section of the building had been maintained, protected. She stopped in front of a door marked Supply Closet B. It was locked. That alone was strange. Every other door in this place had been kicked in or left wide open. She tried the handle again, jiggling it. Solid. She stepped back and aimed her flashlight at the frame. No rust, no corrosion. The lock was new, or at least newer than 2 years. Her pulse quickened. Someone had been here, recently. She pulled a screwdriver from her backpack and wedged it into the doorframe, prying until the wood splintered and the lock gave way. The door swung open, revealing not a closet, but a small room lined with empty metal shelves, and at the back, another door, unmarked, painted the same institutional grey as the walls, like it was trying to disappear. Maya crossed the room and pushed it open. Behind it was an elevator. Her breath caught. She'd worked in hospitals during her last foster placement, cleaning rooms for minimum wage and meal vouchers. She knew how these buildings were laid out. There shouldn't be an elevator here, not in a supply closet, not hidden. The control panel had only 2 buttons, up and down, no floor numbers, no labels. She pressed down. Nothing happened. She tried again, holding it longer this time. A low hum vibrated through the walls, and the doors slid shut with a soft hiss. The elevator lurched, then began to descend. Maya's heart hammered in her chest. She didn't know where this was going, didn't know what she'd find when the doors opened. But she couldn't turn back now. The elevator descended for what felt like forever, far deeper than any basement she'd ever heard of. When it finally stopped, the doors opened onto a hallway bathed in dim emergency lighting. The air here was cold and dry, almost sterile, like the ventilation system was still running. She stepped out slowly, flashlight sweeping left and right. The walls were concrete, painted white, institutional and featureless. There were no windows, no signs, just a long corridor that ended in a heavy steel door. She walked toward it, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The door had a placard bolted to the front, black letters on white, Morgue, authorized personnel only. Maya's stomach twisted. She'd never been down here as a kid, never even knew this level existed, but she knew what a morgue was. Every child in that hospital had known. It was the place you went when the treatments stopped working, the place where Sophie had gone. She reached for the handle. It turned easily, too easily, like it had been oiled. The door opened, and she stepped inside. The morgue was exactly as she'd imagined it. White tile floors, stainless steel tables, and an entire wall of refrigerated drawers, the kind designed to hold bodies. But the room didn't feel abandoned. The lights overhead flickered on automatically as she entered, motion sensors still active. The equipment looked clean, dust-free. Someone had been maintaining this place for years. Maya walked toward the wall of drawers, her reflection warping in the polished steel. There were 24 drawers in total, stacked in rows of 8. Each one had a small label slot, but the labels were missing. She stopped in front of the nearest drawer, chest tight, and pulled the handle. It slid open on smooth rollers, revealing not a body, but rows of small glass vials. Hundreds of them. Each one filled with a clear liquid and marked with a string of numbers and letters she didn't understand. She pulled open another drawer. More vials. Then another. And another. Every single drawer was packed with them, thousands upon thousands, all carefully stored in foam inserts, all labeled, all pristine. Her hands trembled as she picked one up, turning it over in the light. The label read, Compound 73-92-A, Trial Batch 16, December 2006, December 2006. That was 17 years ago, the year before the hospital went under. Maya set the vial down carefully and backed away from the drawers, her mind racing. This wasn't medical waste. This wasn't forgotten inventory. This was something deliberate, something hidden. She turned in a slow circle looking for answers, and that's when she saw it. A desk in the corner of the room, half hidden behind a privacy curtain. She pulled the curtain back and froze. The desk was covered in papers, journals, binders, file boxes stacked 3 feet high, and in the center a framed photograph of a man in a white coat standing beside a little girl with no hair. The girl was smiling, holding up a crayon drawing. The man's eyes were tired but kind. On the frame, a brass nameplate read, Dr. Raymond Khalil, Chief of Research, 1998 to 2007. Maya's throat tightened. She remembered that name. Dr. Khalil. He'd been one of the doctors who treated her when she was little. He was the one who always had candy in his pocket, the one who let her pick the color of her IV tape. She remembered his voice, calm and steady, telling her she was brave, telling her she'd be okay. And then one day, he was just gone. No goodbye, no explanation. The nurses said he'd retired, moved away. But looking at this room, at the vials, at the mountain of hidden research, Maya knew that wasn't the whole truth. She sat down at the desk and opened the top journal. The handwriting was small and precise, filling every inch of every page. She read the first entry, dated March 3rd, 2003. We are close, closer than anyone knows. The synthetic protein bonds are stable. The mice are responding. If we can replicate these results in human trials, we may have found the cure. Not just a treatment, a cure. For Harrington's syndrome. For all of them. Maya's hands shook. Harrington syndrome. She knew that name. It was a rare genetic disorder that caused children's immune systems to attack their own organs. It was brutal, fast, and almost always fatal. Dozens of kids in this hospital had died from it. Sophie had died from it. And according to this journal, Dr. Khalil had been trying to stop it. She flipped forward page after page of test results, chemical formulas, trial outcomes. The research spanned years, and then, halfway through the journal, the tone changed. The entries became frantic, desperate. They want to buy it. Grayson Pharmaceutical made an offer today, $40 million for the patent rights and all research materials. They promised to fast-track FDA approval. But I've seen what they do. They buy breakthroughs and bury them. They'll shelve this for decades, maybe forever, because treating Harrington's is more profitable than curing it. I told them no. They didn't take it well. Maya turned the page. The next entry was dated 2 weeks later. They're threatening to pull funding. The board is siding with them. They say I'm being unreasonable, that $40 million could save the hospital. But what about the children? What about the thousands who will die waiting? I won't let them have this, I won't. The final entry was barely legible, written in a shaking hand. I've hidden everything. Every vial, every page, everything that matters. If they can't find it, they can't bury it. When the time is right, when someone trustworthy comes, maybe it will see the light again. I'm sorry I couldn't finish this myself. Tell Emma I tried. Tell her I never stopped trying. Maya closed the journal and pressed her palms against her eyes, trying not to cry. Emma. That must have been his daughter, the girl in the photograph. She wondered if Emma had Harrington's, wondered if she'd survived, wondered if Dr. Khalil had died, still hoping someone would find this room. And now, 17 years later, someone had. A homeless 19-year-old girl with $47 to her name and nowhere else to go. She looked around the morgue, at the vials lining the walls, at the research that could change everything. She didn't know what any of it was worth, didn't know if it even still worked after all these years. But she knew one thing. This wasn't trash. This wasn't junk to be demolished with the building. This was hope, buried, hidden, and waiting. Maya stood up, legs shaking, and walked back to the wall of drawers. She pulled one open and stared at the rows of glass vials glowing under the fluorescent lights. Somewhere in this room was the cure to a disease that had killed thousands. A cure that billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies had tried to erase. And now it was hers to protect, or to lose forever. What happens next will turn this forgotten morgue into a battlefield, reveal the truth about why some cures never see daylight, and prove that sometimes the most powerless person in the room holds all the power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. She didn't sleep that night. How could she? Maya sat on the cold tile floor of the morgue, surrounded by journals she could barely understand, trying to piece together what Dr. Raymond Khalil had left behind. The research was dense, filled with terms like receptor antagonists and gene therapy vectors that made her head spin, but the core message was clear. He'd created something extraordinary, something the world needed, and he'd hidden it in the one place no one would think to look, a morgue in a dying children's hospital. By the time pale light began filtering through the cracks in the ceiling above, Maya had read through 4 journals and taken inventory of 3 drawers. Each vial was labeled with batch numbers, dates, and chemical compositions. Some were marked viable, others read needs refrigeration or test sample only. But drawer after drawer, it was the same. Thousands of vials of compound 73 in various iterations, all carefully preserved, all waiting. She had no idea what to do with any of it. She couldn't exactly walk into a pharmacy and say, "Hey, I found a morgue full of secret medicine. Can you tell me what it's worth?" And even if she could, who would believe her? She was nobody, a foster kid, a runaway, the kind of person society had already written off. But she couldn't just leave it here either. The demolition crews would be back in January. 2 months, maybe less. Once those bulldozers started, everything in this building would be crushed to dust, buried under concrete, forgotten forever. Just like Dr. Khalil had feared. Maya stood up, legs stiff from sitting on the cold floor, and walked to the steel door. She peered out into the hallway, listening. Silence. The kind that made her skin crawl. She'd been alone in abandoned buildings before, squatting in foreclosed houses or empty warehouses when the shelters were full. But this felt different. This place had secrets. And she was standing in the middle of the biggest one. She stepped out of the morgue and walked back toward the elevator, flashlight in hand. As she passed by, something caught her eye. A door she hadn't noticed before, tucked into an alcove just past the elevator shaft. It was partially open, revealing a darkened office beyond. She pushed it wider and stepped inside. The air was stale and heavy, untouched for years. A desk sat in the center of the room, buried under papers and dust. Filing cabinets lined the walls, drawers hanging open like mouths frozen mid-scream, and on the wall behind the desk, a corkboard covered in photographs. Maya walked closer, her flashlight illuminating face after face. Children, dozens of them. Some bald from chemotherapy, others pale and thin, hooked up to IVs. Each photo had a name written beneath it in careful handwriting. Sophie, age 7, Harrington syndrome, died February 11, 2004. Marcus, age 9, Harrington syndrome, died June 22, 2005. She scanned the board, her chest tightening with every name. There were at least 50 photos, 50 children, all dead. All victims of the same disease Dr. Khalil had been trying to cure. And then, in the bottom corner, she saw it. A photo of a little girl with dark eyes and a hesitant smile, thin hospital gown hanging off her shoulders. Beneath it, the handwriting read, "Maya, age 8, survived." Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself, breath coming in short gasps. He'd kept her photo. After all these years. After she'd left the hospital and disappeared into the foster system, Dr. Khalil had kept her picture on his wall. Not as a memorial, as proof. Proof that survival was possible. Tears blurred her vision as she reached up and touched the photograph, her fingers trembling. She barely remembered that version of herself, that scared little girl who didn't know if she'd see her 9th birthday. But she'd made it, against every odd. And now, standing in the ruins of the place that had saved her life, she realized something. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making sure no other kid ended up on a wall like this. No other Sophie. No other Marcus. Maya wiped her eyes and turned back to the filing cabinets. She pulled open the top drawer and found it stuffed with folders, each one labeled with a patient's name and ID number. She flipped through them quickly, recognizing some of the names from the corkboard. Every file was the same: diagnosis, treatment timeline, outcome, deceased, 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 page after page of children who'd run out of time. But in the back of the cabinet, shoved behind the patient files, was something different. A locked metal box, small and unassuming, with a combination lock on the front. She pulled it out and shook it. Something shifted inside, papers maybe, or something heavier. She tried the lock. It didn't budge. She looked around the office for anything that might help: a letter opener, a screwdriver, anything. That's when she noticed the desk drawer, slightly ajar. She pulled it open and found a small notebook, the kind with a black cover and elastic band. Inside, the first page had a single line of text: "If you're reading this, you already know too much." The combination is Emma's birthday, 04-17-96. Maya's heart raced. She turned back to the metal box and dialed in the numbers. 04-17-96. The lock clicked open. She lifted the lid. Inside was a flash drive, a stack of legal documents, and a handwritten letter on yellowed stationery. She unfolded the letter carefully, the paper brittle with age. "To whoever finds this, my name is Raymond Khalil, and if you're reading this, then I am gone, and this hospital is likely gone too. I don't know who you are or why you're here, but I need you to listen. What you found in the morgue is not just research. It is the culmination of 12 years of my life. It is the answer to a disease that has taken thousands of children, including my daughter Emma. She died on April 17, 1996. She was 9 years old. Harrington's syndrome destroyed her in less than 6 months. I held her hand as she took her last breath, and I swore I would never let another parent go through what I went through. So I dedicated everything to finding a cure. And I did. I found it. Compound 73 works. It stabilizes the immune response. It stops the progression. It saves lives. But the people who run this world don't care about saving lives. They care about profit. Grayson Pharmaceutical wanted to buy my research, not to release it, but to bury it. Treating Harrington's syndrome is worth billions in lifetime medications. Curing it is worth nothing to them. I refused, and they made sure I paid for it. They pulled funding. They turned the board against me. They made me disappear. So I hid everything, every vial, every page of data, everything they wanted to destroy. I stored it in the one place they'd never think to look, and I've waited, hoped, prayed that one day someone would find it. Someone who cares more about children than money. If that's you, please don't let this stay buried. The flash drive contains all the clinical trial data. The documents in this box prove Grayson tried to suppress the cure. Get this to the right people. Make sure Emma didn't die for nothing. Raymond Khalil." Maya's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the letter. She read it twice, then a third time, each word sinking deeper into her chest like a stone. He hadn't just hidden the cure, he'd hidden proof of a conspiracy, proof that a pharmaceutical company had actively tried to bury a life-saving treatment because it threatened their bottom line. And now, that proof was in her hands. She carefully placed the letter back in the box and picked up the flash drive, turning it over in her fingers. This tiny piece of plastic contained everything: trial results, patient outcomes, evidence that could expose one of the biggest companies in the country, evidence that could save thousands of lives, and evidence that could also get her killed. Maya's breath came faster. She looked around the abandoned office, suddenly aware of how alone she was, how vulnerable. If Grayson Pharmaceutical had been willing to destroy a doctor's career 17 years ago, what would they do to a homeless teenager who stumbled onto their secret? She shoved the flash drive into her pocket, grabbed the legal documents, and stuffed them into her backpack. She needed to get out of here, needed to think, needed to figure out who she could trust, if anyone. But as she turned to leave, she heard it. A sound from somewhere above. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Someone else was in the hospital. Maya froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. She clicked off her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty hallways. Then voices. 2, maybe 3 people, talking in low tones she couldn't quite make out. She crept toward the door and peered through the crack. Flashlight beams swept across the corridor above, descending the stairwell toward the basement level. They were coming down. Toward the morgue. Toward her. Maya's mind raced. There was no other way out. The elevator would make noise. The stairwell was already occupied. She was trapped. She backed into the office, scanning desperately for somewhere to hide. The desk was too small, the filing cabinets too obvious. Then she saw it. A ventilation grate near the floor, half hidden behind a toppled chair. She dropped to her knees and pried at the grate with shaking fingers. It came loose with a metallic groan that sounded deafening in the silence. She squeezed through the opening just as the footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. From inside the vent, Maya could see slivers of the hallway through the grate. 3 figures emerged from the stairwell, all dressed in dark clothing, carrying industrial flashlights and equipment bags. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly where they were going. One of them stopped in front of the morgue door and spoke into a radio. "We're in position, beginning sweep now." A voice crackled back through the radio. "Copy that. Retrieve all samples. Destroy any remaining documentation. Building demo is moved up to next week. We need this clean." Next week. Maya's blood ran cold. They weren't here by accident. Someone knew about the morgue. Someone knew what was hidden here, and they were here to erase it. Forever. She watched through the grate as the 3 figures entered the morgue, their voices muffled by the walls. She heard the screech of metal drawers being opened, the clink of glass vials, the rustle of papers. They were taking everything. Everything Dr. Khalil had died to protect. Everything that could save lives. And she was powerless to stop them. Or was she? Maya looked down at her backpack, at the flash drive and documents pressed against her chest. They didn't know she was here. Didn't know she'd already found the most important pieces. The proof, the data, the truth. And as long as she had those, the cure wasn't lost. Not yet. She crawled deeper into the ventilation shaft, moving as quietly as she could, following the ductwork away from the morgue. Her elbows scraped against metal, her backpack caught on rivets. But she kept moving, inch by inch, until the voices faded behind her, and all she could hear was her own ragged breathing and the pounding of her heart. She didn't know where the vent would lead, didn't know if she'd make it out alive. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. Because Maya Chen had spent her entire life being powerless, shuffled from home to home, told she didn't matter, told to be grateful for scraps. But in that moment, crawling through the darkness with $300 million worth of hope pressed against her chest, she realized something. She wasn't powerless anymore. She was the only one who knew the truth. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing you can be. The ventilation shaft spit Maya out into a loading dock behind the hospital 3 hours before sunrise. She hit the concrete hard, skinning her palms, backpack tumbling beside her. For a moment she just lay there, gasping, listening for footsteps or voices or the sound of anyone chasing her. But there was nothing. Just the hum of distant traffic and the rattle of chain-link fencing in the November wind. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed her bag, and ran. She didn't stop until she was 6 blocks away, hidden in the doorway of a closed laundromat, hands shaking so badly she could barely unzip her backpack to check if everything was still there. The flash drive, the documents, Dr. Khalil's letter, all of it, intact. She pressed the bag against her chest and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs for hours. They were cleaning the morgue, destroying evidence, moving up the demolition. Someone powerful wanted that research gone, wanted it erased so completely that no one would ever know it existed. But they were too late, because a 19-year-old girl with nothing to lose had gotten there first. Maya pulled out the flash drive and stared at it under the flickering streetlight. This tiny piece of plastic contained data that could expose a conspiracy, Data that proved a pharmaceutical giant had buried a cure to protect their profits. But data was useless if no one believed it. And who was going to believe her? She had no credentials, no connections, no proof she hadn't just stolen this from somewhere. She needed help. She needed someone who understood what she'd found, someone who couldn't be bought or scared into silence. She thought back to her years in the hospital, trying to remember faces, names, anyone who had cared. Most of the staff had been kind but distant, doing their jobs, moving on. But there was one person who'd been different. Nurse Grace Okonkwo. She'd been one of the night shift nurses in pediatric care, the one who smuggled in extra pudding cups and read stories when the pain was too bad to sleep. Grace had held Maya's hand during the worst procedures, had braided her hair when it started growing back, had promised her that life outside the hospital would be worth fighting for. Maya hadn't seen her in 7 years, didn't even know if she still lived in Camden Falls, but it was the only lead she had. She pulled out her phone, the screen cracked from too many falls, battery at 11%. She opened a browser and searched, Grace Okonkwo Camden Falls Nurse. The results loaded slowly. Then there it was, Grace Okonkwo, RN, currently employed at Camden Falls Community Clinic. A photo showed an older version of the woman Maya remembered, grey streaking through her black hair but the same warm smile. Maya's throat tightened. She clicked on the clinic's address and started walking. It was 4 miles across town. Her feet ached, her stomach was empty, but she walked anyway, because she didn't have a choice. By the time she reached the clinic, the sky was turning pale grey with early morning light. The building was small and plain, wedged between a dollar store and a tax preparation office. A hand-painted sign read, Community Clinic, walk-ins welcome, sliding scale fees. Maya tried the door, locked. Hours posted on the window said they opened at 8. She had 90 minutes to kill. She sat down on the curb outside, backpack between her knees, and waited. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. What if Grace didn't remember her? What if she did remember her but didn't believe her? What if she called the police? Maya had broken into private property, technically trespassing. She could be arrested, thrown into a cell. And then what would happen to the flash drive, to the cure? She pulled Dr. Khalil's letter from her bag and read it again, focusing on the words. Get this to the right people. Make sure Emma didn't die for nothing. Emma, the little girl in the photograph. 9 years old when Harrington syndrome took her. Maya wondered what she'd looked like before the disease. If she'd liked drawing or playing outside or reading chapter books. If she'd known how hard her father had fought to save her. How hard he was still fighting, even after death. A car pulled into the parking lot, breaking her thoughts. Maya looked up. A woman stepped out, keys jingling, coffee cup in hand. Grace. Older, rounder, but unmistakably her. Maya stood up quickly, too quickly, and Grace startled. Clinic doesn't open until 8, Grace said, eyeing Maya with the practiced wariness of someone who worked with the public. You'll have to wait. I know, Maya said, her voice cracking. I'm not here as a patient. I'm here because I need to talk to you. It's about the children's hospital. Grace stopped, her hand frozen on the door. The old hospital. That place has been closed for years. I know, but there's something still inside. Something important. Something you need to see. Grace studied her for a long moment, taking in the too thin jacket, the worn backpack, the exhaustion carved into Maya's face. Then her eyes widened slightly. Do I know you? Maya swallowed hard. My name is Maya Chen. You took care of me when I was 8 years old. Pediatric wing. I had an immune disorder and recurring infections. You used to braid my hair. Grace's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, hitting the pavement and splashing across the concrete. Maya? Little Maya? Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I thought about you so many times over the years. Wondered if you were okay. If you'd made it. I made it, Maya said quietly. Barely. Grace closed the distance between them and pulled Maya into a hug so tight it hurt. Maya stood stiff at first, unused to being touched, then slowly relaxed into it. When Grace finally pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "Come inside," Grace said, unlocking the door. "Tell me everything." They sat in Grace's small office at the back of the clinic, door closed, the world shut out. Maya spread the documents across the desk. Dr. Khalil's letter, pages from his journals, printouts of vial labels she'd photographed with her phone, and the flash drive sitting in the center like a grenade. Grace read the letter twice, her hands shaking, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and finally anger. "Raymond did this?" Grace whispered. "He hid a cure?" "He didn't just hide a cure," Maya said. "He hid proof that Grayson Pharmaceutical tried to bury it. They wanted to buy the research so they could shelve it forever. He said no, so they destroyed him." Grace sat back in her chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I remember when he left. It was sudden. The hospital said he resigned for personal reasons. There were rumors, of course, people always talk, but no one knew what really happened. And then 2 months later, he was dead. Heart attack, they said." Maya's stomach twisted. "Heart attack? Or was he killed?" Grace looked up sharply. "You think they murdered him?" "I don't know, but people who bury billion-dollar cures don't usually leave loose ends." For a long moment, Grace said nothing. Then she picked up the flash drive and turned it over in her hands. "You said there's data on here, clinical trial results." Maya nodded. "Everything. According to his letter, Compound 73 works. It stops Harrington's syndrome. It saves lives. But we need someone who can verify it. Someone who can't be bought." Grace stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the empty parking lot. "There's a researcher I know, Dr. Sarah Vance. She works at Harbor Medical University, about an hour from here. She specializes in genetic disorders. If anyone can tell us if this is real, it's her." "Can we trust her?" Grace turned back. "Sarah lost her son to Harrington's syndrome 9 years ago. If there's anyone in this world who can't be bought by pharmaceutical companies, it's her." 2 hours later, they were in Grace's car, driving through the morning rush hour toward Harbor Medical University. Maya sat in the passenger seat, backpack on her lap, watching the city blur past. She hadn't been in a car with someone who cared about her in longer than she could remember. It felt strange, fragile, like at any moment it could shatter. "Why did you come back?" Grace asked suddenly. "To the hospital, I mean, after all these years." Maya didn't answer right away. She stared out the window at the grey sky. "I had nowhere else to go," she said finally. "I aged out of foster care last week. No family, no money. I thought maybe I could squat in the hospital for a while, just until I figured something out." She laughed bitterly. "I was looking for shelter. I found $300 million instead." Grace glanced over at her. "You know what this means, right? If this cure is real, if it works, you're sitting on something that could change the world. But it also makes you a target." "I know. Those men you saw in the morgue, they weren't there by accident. Someone sent them, someone who knows what's down there and wants it gone." "I know." Grace's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Maya, I need you to understand something. If we go forward with this, if we try to expose what Grayson did, they will come after you. They have lawyers, money, power. They will tear your life apart. They will call you a thief, a liar, anything to discredit you." Maya turned to look at her. "What's the alternative? Let them demolish the building next week and bury the cure forever. Let more kids die because some executives want to protect their stock price." She shook her head. "I've spent my whole life being powerless, being shuffled around, being told I don't matter. For once, I have something that matters. I'm not walking away." Grace's eyes shimmered with tears. "You've grown up strong." "I've grown up angry," Maya said quietly. "There's a difference." Harbor Medical University was a sprawling campus of glass buildings and manicured lawns. Grace parked in the visitor lot, and they made their way to the research center, a 5-story structure with floor-to-ceiling windows and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Grace asked for Dr. Sarah Vance, and after a brief phone call, they were directed to the third floor. Dr. Vance met them in the hallway. She was in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and graying blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore a white lab coat over jeans and a faded t-shirt that read, "Science doesn't care what you believe." When Grace introduced Maya, Sarah's expression shifted from polite confusion to intense focus. "Grace said you found something related to Harrington's syndrome research," Sarah asked, leading them into a small conference room. Maya set her backpack on the table and pulled out the flash drive. "More than something, I found a cure." Sarah's face went pale. "Excuse me?" For the next 20 minutes, Maya explained everything. The abandoned hospital, the hidden morgue, the vials, Dr. Khalil's journals and his letter, the pharmaceutical company's attempt to bury the research. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more incredulous with every sentence. When Maya finished, Sarah picked up the flash drive like it might explode. "If what you're saying is true," Sarah said slowly, "this is the most significant medical discovery in decades. Harrington syndrome has no cure. The best we can do is manage symptoms, extend life by a few years at most. But a cure," she shook her head, "that would save thousands of lives, tens of thousands globally." "Can you verify it?" Maya asked. "Can you look at the data and tell us if it's real?" Sarah nodded. "I can try, but it's going to take time. Clinical trial data is complex. I'll need to review the methodology, the results, the safety profiles." She paused. "And if it's real, we'll need to figure out how to move forward without getting shut down." "Grayson Pharmaceutical tried to buy this research 17 years ago," Grace said. "They failed, but they haven't forgotten. Someone sent people to the hospital this morning to destroy evidence. They're moving up the demolition." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then we move faster." She inserted the flash drive into her laptop and began pulling up files. Spreadsheets appeared on the screen, dense with numbers and abbreviations, then charts, graphs, video files labeled patient trials. Sarah clicked on one. The video showed a young boy, maybe 6 years old, hooked up to monitors in a hospital bed. A timestamp in the corner read June 14th, 2005. A voice off camera, Dr. Khalil's voice, spoke gently. "How are you feeling today, Marcus?" The boy smiled weakly. "Better, I think." "That's good. That's very good. We're going to keep monitoring your levels, okay? You're doing great." The video ended. Sarah opened another file, this one showing the same boy 3 months later. He was sitting up in bed, coloring. No monitors, no IV. He looked healthy, normal. The timestamp read September 22nd, 2005. Sarah froze the video and turned to Maya and Grace. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Harrington's syndrome doesn't go into remission. It doesn't just get better." "Unless you cure it," Maya said. Sarah opened file after file, patient after patient, all showing the same progression. Severe symptoms, treatment with compound 73, followed by dramatic improvement. Some patients showed complete remission. Others stabilized to the point where they could live normal lives. Out of 32 trial subjects, 29 survived, 29, for a disease with a 98% fatality rate. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her hands covering her mouth. "This is real," she said, voice shaking. "This is actually real. Raymond Khalil found a cure for Harrington's syndrome, and someone buried it." Maya felt something break open inside her chest. She'd hoped it was real, but hoping and knowing were different. Knowing meant this was worth fighting for. Knowing meant the men in the morgue were destroying something priceless. Knowing meant Dr. Khalil had died protecting a miracle. "How much is it worth?" Maya asked quietly. "If we could produce this, if we could bring it to market, how much?" Sarah turned to her. "Financially? Billions. Grayson Pharmaceuticals' Harrington's treatment drugs generate over $4 billion a year in revenue. A cure would obliterate that market overnight. But morally?" She shook her head. "You can't put a price on this. This is the kind of discovery that reshapes medicine, that saves generations." "300 million," Grace said suddenly. They both looked at her. That's what the vials in the morgue are worth conservatively. I saw the inventory. Thousands of doses. Enough to treat every active Harrington's case in the country right now. Maya's head spun. $300 million. She'd spent her entire life counting quarters for laundry, skipping meals to save money, wearing shoes until the soles fell off. And now she was sitting on a fortune that could change everything. She could buy a house, go to college, never worry about rent or food or survival again. But there was a catch. A massive, life-threatening catch. The only way to cash in was to go public, to fight Grayson Pharmaceutical and every lawyer they could throw at her, to become a target. "What do we do?" Maya asked, looking between Grace and Sarah. "How do we get this out there without getting destroyed?" Sarah closed the laptop. "We need allies, media, legal protection, and we need to move the vials somewhere safe before they're destroyed." "The demolition is next week," Grace said. "Then we have 6 days," Sarah replied. 6 days to document everything, secure the research, and blow this wide open. She looked at Maya. "Are you ready for that? Because once we start, there's no going back." Maya thought about the corkboard in Dr. Khalil's office. 50 faces. 50 children who died waiting for a cure that already existed. She thought about Sophie, who used to draw butterflies on the ceiling. About Marcus, who'd survived the trials only to disappear into the foster system like Maya had. About Emma, 9 years old, gone too soon, her father's last hope. She thought about the men in the morgue, erasing evidence, protecting profits. And she thought about the letter. Make sure Emma didn't die for nothing. Maya stood up. "I'm ready." Over the next 3 days, they worked in secret. Sarah brought in 2 trusted colleagues, researchers who'd lost loved ones to Harrington's syndrome and had no love for pharmaceutical giants. Together, they analyzed the data on the flash drive, verifying every trial, every result, every claim Dr. Khalil had made. The consensus was unanimous. Compound 73 worked. It was safe, effective, and reproducible. It was everything he'd said it was. Meanwhile, Grace coordinated with a local investigative journalist named Marcus Lynn, someone she'd worked with years ago on a story about hospital funding corruption. Marcus was in his 50s, grizzled and skeptical, but when he saw the evidence, when he read Dr. Khalil's letter and watched the trial videos, his skepticism turned to fury. "I've been covering pharmaceutical corruption for 20 years, he said, sitting across from Maya in Sarah's office. "But this is bigger than anything I've ever seen. If we can prove Grayson Pharmaceutical actively suppressed a cure, it's not just a lawsuit, it's criminal." "Can we prove it?" Maya asked. Marcus tapped the documents spread across the table. "These letters between Khalil and Grayson executives? The offer letters? The threat to pull funding? Yeah, we can prove it. But here's the problem. You're a 19-year-old with no legal standing. Grayson will claim you stole proprietary research, that you're fabricating evidence, that you're trying to extort them. They'll bury you in lawsuits before we even get to trial." "So what do I do?" Marcus leaned forward. "You go public first. Big, loud, undeniable. You give an interview, release the documents, show the trial videos. Make it so big they can't silence you without making it worse." "And then?" "Then we find families, victims, people whose children died from Harrington's while this cure sat in a basement. We build a class action. We make this so big, so public, that Grayson has no choice but to settle or face criminal charges." Maya felt sick. "I don't want to be famous. I just want the cure to get out there." Marcus's expression softened. "I know, kid. But sometimes doing the right thing means stepping into the spotlight, even when you don't want to." On the 4th day, they went back to the hospital. It was risky, insane even, but they needed more evidence. Sarah wanted physical samples of the vials to run independent tests. Marcus wanted photos of the morgue, the journals, the corkboard with the children's faces. They needed documentation so thorough that Grayson couldn't claim it was fabricated. They went at night, just Maya, Grace, and Marcus. Sarah stayed behind, analyzing data and preparing a formal research brief, The hospital was darker than Maya remembered, more oppressive. They slipped through the same cut fence, through the same side entrance. Maya led them through the halls, flashlight beam cutting through the dust. When they reached the supply closet with the hidden elevator, she hesitated. "They were here 3 days ago," she whispered. "They could still be watching." Grace squeezed her shoulder. "Then we move fast." The elevator descended into the sub-basement, that same mechanical hum filling the silence. The doors opened. The morgue was exactly as Maya had left it, but something felt wrong. The air was different. Colder. She stepped out, Grace and Marcus behind her, and immediately froze. The drawers, they were open. All of them, empty. Every single vial was gone. Marcus cursed under his breath. Grace walked to the nearest drawer and ran her hand along the empty foam inserts. "They came back," she said quietly. "They took everything." Maya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. All those vials, all those doses, $300 million worth of medicine, gone, destroyed probably, incinerated or dumped in a landfill where no one would ever find them. She wanted to scream, wanted to cry, wanted to punch the steel drawers until her knuckles bled. But instead, she walked to Dr. Khalil's desk in the corner, pulled back the privacy curtain, and stopped. The desk was ransacked, journals torn apart, papers scattered, filing cabinets pried open and emptied, but hanging on the wall, untouched, was the corkboard. 50 faces staring back at her, 50 reasons to keep fighting. And, pinned in the center, her own photo. Maya, age 8, survived. She reached up and carefully removed the photo, folding it and tucking it into her pocket. Then she turned to Grace and Marcus. "They took the vials," she said, voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "But they didn't take the data. They didn't take the proof. We still have the flash drive. We still have the trial videos. We still have Dr. Khalil's letter. That's enough." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we go public. Tomorrow." Back at Sarah's office, they worked through the night preparing. Marcus wrote the article. Sarah compiled the research brief. Grace contacted families, dozens of them, people who'd lost children to Harrington's syndrome, people who deserved to know the truth. And Maya sat in the corner, staring at the photo of her 8-year-old self, trying to remember what it felt like to be that scared little girl who thought she'd never leave that hospital alive. She'd survived, against every odd. And now she was going to make sure others survived too, even if it meant going to war with one of the most powerful companies in the world, even if it meant risking everything, because sometimes the girl with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the room, and Maya Chen had absolutely nothing left to lose. The article dropped at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. Marcus had published it on his independent news site, a platform known for investigative work that mainstream media wouldn't touch. The headline was simple and devastating. Pharmaceutical giant buried cure for fatal children's disease, whistleblower reveals hidden research worth $300 million. Within an hour, it had 5,000 shares. By noon, 50,000. By evening, it was trending on every social media platform, picked up by national news outlets, debated on talk shows, dissected by medical experts on television. Maya's face was everywhere. The photo Marcus had chosen showed her standing in front of the abandoned hospital, backpack over one shoulder, exhaustion carved into her features but determination blazing in her eyes. She looked exactly like what she was, a survivor fighting back. The phone in Sarah's office rang non-stop. Journalists requesting interviews, medical researchers asking for access to the data, families of Harrington syndrome victims crying, demanding answers, and lawyers, so many lawyers. By the second day, Maya had received 17 cease and desist letters, 9 lawsuits for theft and defamation, and 4 court orders demanding she surrender all materials to Grayson Pharmaceutical immediately. "They're trying to bury you in paperwork," Marcus said, sorting through the stack of legal documents that had been delivered by courier. "Standard intimidation tactic. They want you overwhelmed, scared, broke from legal fees before this ever sees a courtroom." Maya sat across from him in Sarah's conference room, Grace beside her, both of them looking at the mountain of threats. "So what do we do?" "We fight," Grace said firmly. We find lawyers who'll work pro bono who believe in this. Already on it, Sarah said, walking in with her laptop. I've been contacted by 3 different legal non-profits that specialize in pharmaceutical accountability. They're willing to take the case. No fees. They just want Grayson exposed. Maya felt a tiny flicker of hope. They'll really help. They've been waiting for a case like this for years, Sarah replied. David versus Goliath, a powerless teenager against a billion-dollar corporation. The optics alone are devastating for Grayson. But optics only mattered if they could survive long enough to use them. That afternoon, Maya got her first real taste of what she was up against. A black town car pulled up outside the clinic where they'd been working. 4 people stepped out, 3 men in expensive suits and 1 woman with silver hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than Maya's entire life. They walked into the clinic like they owned it. Grace met them at the door. This is a private medical facility. You need an appointment. The woman smiled, cold and sharp. My name is Victoria Harmon. I'm General Counsel for Grayson Pharmaceutical. We're here to speak with Maya Chen. Maya stood up from where she'd been sitting in the back office. Something in her refused to hide. She walked to the front, met Victoria's eyes and said, I'm Maya. Victoria's smile didn't falter. Miss Chen, we'd like to discuss this situation before it escalates further. There's nothing to discuss, Maya said. I'm not giving you the research. We're not asking you to give us anything, Victoria said smoothly. We're here to make you an offer, a very generous offer. They moved to the conference room. Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the table. Maya looked down. It was a check, made out to her, for $10 million. Her hands started shaking. $10 million. More money than she could comprehend. Enough to change her entire life. Buy a house, go to college, never worry about food or rent or survival ever again. That's yours, Victoria said. Right now, no strings attached. All we ask is that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and turn over all research materials, including the flash drive, Dr. Khalil's journals, and any samples you may have taken. Maya stared at the check. And the cure? What happens to it? Grayson Pharmaceutical will continue Dr. Khalil's important work, Victoria said, her tone practiced and polished. We'll run our own trials, seek FDA approval, and bring this treatment to market through the proper channels. How long will that take? Victoria hesitated. These things take time. 5 years, maybe 10. We have to ensure safety, efficacy, proper protocols. Children are dying now, Maya said quietly. Hundreds of them, every year. Which is why proper testing is crucial, Victoria countered. We can't just release an untested drug into the population. That would be irresponsible. Maya looked at Grace, who was shaking her head slightly, then at Sarah, whose face was tight with barely controlled anger. She looked back at the check. $10 million. She could take it, walk away, let someone else fight this battle. She'd done her part. She'd exposed the truth. Wasn't that enough? But then she thought about the corkboard in Dr. Khalil's office. 50 faces, Sophie, Marcus, Emma. All dead because this cure had been buried once before. She thought about his letter. They'll shelve this for decades, maybe forever, because treating Harrington's is more profitable than curing it. She pushed the check back across the table. No. Victoria's smile finally cracked. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not signing anything, and I'm not giving you the research. One of the men in suits leaned forward. Miss Chen, you need to understand the legal position you're in. That research was conducted on Grayson property using Grayson funding. It belongs to us. It was conducted at Camden Falls Children's Hospital, Maya shot back, a public institution, and Dr. Khalil hid it specifically to keep it away from you. He had no legal right to do that, the man said. What he did was theft. What you did was murder, Maya said, her voice rising. You let thousands of children die to protect your profit margins. That's not business. That's genocide. Victoria stood up, her composure back in place. We tried to be reasonable. We offered you a life-changing amount of money. But if you insist on pursuing this, we will bury you in litigation. We will take everything you have and everything you'll ever have. We will destroy your credibility, your reputation, your future, and in the end, we'll get the research anyway. Because we have the resources to fight this for decades. Do you? Maya stood up too, meeting Victoria's gaze. I have something better than resources. I have the truth. Victoria smiled thinly. Truth is expensive, Miss Chen. Let's see how long yours lasts. They left. Maya's hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from rage. She turned to Grace and Sarah, who both looked shaken. Did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Grace pulled her into a hug. No, baby, you just made the bravest choice of your life. But bravery didn't pay legal bills. Over the next 3 days, Grayson's lawyers filed motion after motion. They filed an injunction preventing Maya from discussing the research publicly. They claimed she'd committed breaking and entering, theft, and industrial espionage. They demanded the return of all materials. They froze her bank account, all $47 of it, claiming it might contain proceeds from stolen property. Maya couldn't even buy food without Grace or Sarah paying for her. The legal nonprofits Sarah had contacted came through, sending a team of 3 lawyers who were young, hungry, and furious at what Grayson had done. They filed counter-motions, argued that the research was abandoned property that Maya had legally salvaged, and requested an emergency hearing to prevent the hospital demolitions scheduled for the following week. The hearing was set for Friday morning, 3 days away. But before that, Maya got a visitor. A woman showed up at the clinic, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a faded jacket, her eyes red from crying. Grace brought her back to the conference room where Maya was reviewing documents with the lawyers. Maya, the woman said, my name is Jennifer Torres. My daughter Sophia has Harrington's syndrome. She's 6 years old. She has maybe 8 months left. I saw your story. I saw the videos of those children who survived the trials. Please tell me you still have access to that medicine. Maya's throat closed up. She looked at the woman's desperate face and saw every parent who'd sat in hospital waiting rooms, who'd held their child through painful treatments, who'd watched them slip away. The vials were destroyed, she said, her voice breaking. Grayson's people took them from the morgue. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jennifer's face crumpled. But the research, the formula? Someone could make more, right? Sarah stepped forward. We have all of Dr. Khalil's data. The complete formula, the protocols, everything needed to synthesize more compound 73. But Grayson is blocking us from doing anything with it. Why? Jennifer's voice was raw. Why would they do that? Because if this cure reaches the market, they lose $4 billion a year in treatment drugs, one of the lawyers said bluntly. They're willing to let children die to protect that revenue. Jennifer sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. My baby is dying, and they're letting it happen for money. Maya knelt beside her. We're fighting. I promise you we're fighting, but I need your help. I need the families. If you know other parents, other victims, we need them to speak up. We need to show the world what Grayson is doing. Jennifer looked up, tears streaming down her face. I'll get you an army. She kept her word. Within 24 hours, Marcus's news site published a second article. Dozens of families come forward, demand access to buried Harrington's cure. Interviews with parents like Jennifer. Photos of children, some still fighting, others who'd already lost the battle. Stories of bankruptcies from medical bills, of siblings who'd watched their brothers and sisters die, of grandparents who'd buried children and grandchildren. The response was seismic. Protests erupted outside Grayson Pharmaceuticals' headquarters. Patient advocacy groups filed amicus briefs supporting Maya's case. Politicians who'd received campaign donations from Grayson suddenly faced angry constituents demanding they return the money. The pressure was building, but so was the danger. Maya started noticing cars following her, black sedans with tinted windows that parked across from the clinic or idled near Sarah's office building. Grace insisted she stop staying at the women's shelter where she'd been sleeping and moved her into her own home, a small house on the south side of town. Sarah hired private security after someone broke into her office and tried to access her computer. Marcus's website was hit with multiple cyber attacks, trying to take the articles down. "They're scared," Marcus said, showing Maya the attack logs, "which means we're winning, but it also means they're getting desperate." The emergency hearing was on Friday. Maya put on the only dress she owned, borrowed from Grace, and walked into the courthouse with her legal team. The courtroom was packed: journalists, families, representatives from Grayson. And sitting in the back, a face Maya recognized from Dr. Khalil's photograph. An older woman, maybe 50, with his eyes. Emma. Maya's heart stopped. She'd assumed Emma died. That's what the journal entries had implied. But here she was, alive. Maya wanted to run to her, to ask how, to tell her what her father had done. But the bailiff was calling the courtroom to order. Judge Margaret Holloway presided, a stern woman in her 60s with grey hair and no patience for nonsense. Grayson's lawyers went first, arguing that Maya had unlawfully entered private property, stolen valuable research, and was now attempting to profit from it. They presented the freeze orders, the cease and desist letters, and a dozen legal precedents about intellectual property rights. Then Maya's team stood up. The lead attorney, a woman named Rachel Kim, who'd spent 10 years fighting pharmaceutical companies, didn't waste time with legal jargon. She played the trial videos, showed the before and after footage of children with Harrington syndrome, played Dr. Khalil's voice explaining how Compound 73 worked. Then she read his letter aloud, every devastating word, ending with, "Get this to the right people. Make sure Emma didn't die for nothing." "Except Emma didn't die, Your Honor," Rachel said, turning to gesture at the back of the courtroom. "She survived, because her father gave her the cure. And then Grayson Pharmaceutical tried to bury that cure so no other child could have it." The courtroom erupted. Judge Holloway banged her gavel for silence. Grayson's lawyers objected, called it hearsay, demanded the testimony be stricken, but the judge held up her hand. "I'll allow it. Miss Chen, please approach the bench." Maya stood on shaking legs and walked forward. Judge Holloway looked down at her. "Young lady, do you understand the magnitude of what you've started?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you understand that Grayson Pharmaceutical has the resources to drag this through courts for years, that they can make your life extremely difficult?" "I understand." "Then why not take their settlement? Why not walk away with $10 million and let someone else fight this battle?" Maya thought about how to answer. About Sophie and the butterflies, about Marcus in the trial videos, getting better, living, about Jennifer's daughter Sophia, 8 months left, about the 50 faces on that corkboard. "Because someone has to," she said finally, "and it might as well be me." Judge Holloway studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to Grayson's lawyers. "I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the demolition of Camden Falls Children's Hospital, pending further investigation. I'm also ordering Grayson Pharmaceutical to turn over all internal communications regarding Dr. Khalil's research and the attempted acquisition of said research between 2005 and 2007. The lawyers exploded in objections. The judge banged her gavel. "Furthermore, I'm appointing an independent medical board to review the data on this flash drive and determine its validity. If Dr. Khalil's cure is proven effective, we'll discuss how to move forward. This hearing is adjourned." Maya nearly collapsed. Rachel caught her arm. "We won, for now." Outside the courthouse, the families were waiting. Jennifer ran up and hugged Maya so hard her ribs ached. Other parents crowded around, thanking her, crying, asking if this meant their children would be saved. Maya didn't know what to tell them. The legal battle was just beginning. But for the first time, they had a chance. She broke away from the crowd and found the older woman from the back of the courtroom. Emma. Up close, Maya could see the resemblance to Dr. Khalil even more clearly. The same kind eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. "You're Emma," Maya said. The woman nodded. "I am." And you're the girl who found my father's work. I thought you died. His journal said, I was dying, Emma interrupted. I had maybe 3 weeks left when my father gave me the first dose of compound 73. It was October 2006. I was 9 years old. By December, I was in remission. By the following spring, I was cured. Tears filled her eyes. He saved my life. But then Grayson came after him, threatened him, destroyed his career. The stress killed him. Heart attack, they said, but I've always wondered. Why didn't you come forward before? Maya asked. Why didn't you tell people he'd found a cure? Emma's face twisted with pain. I was 10 years old when he died. My mother was terrified Grayson would come after us next. She made me promise to stay silent, to never tell anyone. And I kept that promise for 17 years. Until I saw your face on the news and realized someone finally had the courage to do what I couldn't. Maya reached out and took Emma's hand. Your father was a hero. He gave up everything to save you and to save others. I'm going to make sure the world knows that. Thank you, Emma whispered. Thank you for not letting them bury him twice. That evening, back at Grace's house, Maya sat on the couch with the television on. The news was covering the hearing. Her face flashed across the screen, the caption reading, 19-year-old takes on pharmaceutical giant. Pundits debated whether she was brave or reckless, whether the cure was real or a hoax, whether Grayson would crush her or settle. Grace sat beside her, handing her a cup of tea. How are you holding up? Maya wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I'm terrified, but I'm also angrier than I've ever been. They took the vials. They destroyed the medicine. Children are dying right now because of what they did, and they're acting like they're the victims. That's how power works, Grace said quietly. When you have it, you convince yourself you deserve it, that anyone who challenges you is the enemy. I'm just one person, Maya said. One broke, homeless, nobody. How am I supposed to beat them? Grace turned to look at her. You're not nobody. You're a survivor, and survivors know how to fight when no one else will. The next morning, Maya woke to her phone buzzing non-stop. Sarah had sent her a link. She clicked it. The Independent Medical Board had released their preliminary findings. Compound 73 was viable, effective, safe. Dr. Raymond Khalil had indeed found a cure for Harrington syndrome, and Grayson Pharmaceutical had known about it. The internet exploded. Within hours, 6 more families had filed lawsuits against Grayson. 3 senators called for federal investigations. The FDA announced they were reviewing the case, and Grayson's stock price dropped 12% in a single trading day. But Maya knew this was just the beginning. Grayson had billions of dollars and an army of lawyers. They wouldn't go down without a fight, and they'd proven they were willing to destroy anyone who got in their way. She'd started something she couldn't stop now. A war between one powerless girl and one of the most powerful corporations in the world. And somehow, impossibly, she was winning. But winning battles didn't mean winning wars, and the real fight was just getting started. The weeks following the preliminary findings turned into months of brutal legal warfare. Grayson Pharmaceutical didn't just fight back, they went nuclear. They filed 17 separate lawsuits against Maya, claiming everything from defamation to corporate espionage. They hired private investigators who dug through her entire life, looking for anything to discredit her. They leaked stories to friendly media outlets painting her as an opportunist, a thief, someone trying to profit from tragedy. But for every attack Grayson launched, the public pushed back harder. Families affected by Harrington's syndrome organized rallies in dozens of cities. Medical ethics boards condemned Grayson's actions. Universities that had received Grayson funding faced protests from their own students demanding they return the money. And Maya's legal team, now swollen to include pro bono attorneys from 3 major firms, filed motion after motion exposing just how deep Grayson's corruption ran. The turning point came in March, 4 months after Maya had broken into that abandoned hospital. The court-appointed Independent Medical Board released their full report, not just preliminary findings, but a comprehensive 300-page analysis that confirmed everything Dr. Raymond Khalil had claimed. Compound 73 was not only effective, It was revolutionary. The cure rate in the original trials was 87%. 87. For a disease that had a 98% fatality rate with existing treatments. More devastating for Grayson, the report included internal emails the court had forced them to release. Emails from 2006 showing executives discussing Dr. Khalil's breakthrough and explicitly deciding to suppress it. One email from a vice president read, "If this cure reaches market, we lose our entire Harrington's treatment division. 4.2 billion annually. Recommend acquisition and indefinite shelving. This is an existential threat to Q3 revenue projections." They'd put it in writing. They'd valued quarterly profits over children's lives. And now the whole world could see it. The day the report went public, Grayson's stock dropped 31%. Their CEO resigned. Federal prosecutors opened a criminal investigation. And Maya sat in Grace's living room, watching it all unfold on television, feeling numb. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. "You did this," Grace said, sitting beside her. "You exposed them." "I just opened a door," Maya said quietly. "Dr. Khalil did everything else. He spent 12 years of his life on this. I spent 4 months. Don't diminish what you've done. You could have taken their money. You could have walked away. You chose to fight." Maya thought about that, about the $10 million check she'd pushed back across the table, about the threats, the lawsuits, the sleepless nights wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. "I didn't have a choice," she said finally. "Not really. Not after I saw those faces on the corkboard. Not after I read his letter." Her phone rang. "Sarah," Maya answered. "Have you seen the news?" "I'm watching it now." "Then you need to see this too. Check your email. Subject line, partnership proposal." Maya grabbed her laptop and opened her email. The message was from an organization called the Global Medical Ethics Foundation, a non-profit research group that operated outside pharmaceutical company influence. They were funded entirely by donations and operated clinics in underserved communities around the world. The email was from their director, a doctor named Amara Osei. "Dear Miss Chen, we've been following your case with intense interest. What you've uncovered is not just a medical breakthrough, but a moral imperative. The Global Medical Ethics Foundation would like to partner with you to bring Dr. Khalil's cure to the children who need it. We're not interested in profits or patents. We want to manufacture Compound 73 and distribute it at cost to any child suffering from Harrington's syndrome, regardless of their ability to pay. We understand you hold the rights to Dr. Khalil's research as the legal salvager of abandoned property. We're prepared to offer you a partnership. We'll handle all manufacturing, distribution, and clinical implementation. In exchange, we ask only that you agree to keep the formula public domain, preventing any company from patenting and monopolizing it. We can also offer you a modest royalty, 10% of manufacturing revenues, to compensate you for your discovery and to support your ongoing work. This isn't about money. This is about making sure no child ever dies waiting for a cure that already exists. We would be honored to work with you. Dr. Amara Osei, Director, Global Medical Ethics Foundation. Maya read it 3 times, then a 4th. Her hands were shaking. "They want to make it," she said into the phone. "They want to actually produce the cure." "I know," Sarah said. "Amara called me an hour ago to vet the proposal. I've done my research on them. They're legitimate. They've manufactured and distributed treatments for neglected diseases in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia for 20 years. If anyone can do this right, it's them." "What about Grayson? Won't they try to block this?" "They'll try," Sarah said. "But their legal position is collapsing. Public opinion has turned completely against them. And now that federal prosecutors are involved, they're more worried about staying out of prison than protecting patents." Maya closed her eyes. This was it. This was what Dr. Khalil had wanted. His cure, available to everyone who needed it, not locked behind patents and profit margins. "Tell them yes," she said. "Tell them I'll partner with them." The deal came together over the next 6 weeks. Maya's legal team negotiated the terms. The formula would remain public domain, available to any manufacturer who wanted to produce it. The Global Medical Ethics Foundation would be the primary producer, making Compound 73 at cost and distributing it through their global network of clinics. Maya would receive a 10% royalty on all sales, not as profit, but as compensation that would allow her to establish something she'd been dreaming about since this began: a foundation for foster youth. Kids who aged out of the system like she had, left with nothing, told to figure it out, abandoned by the world. She wanted to build something that would catch them, give them housing, education, job training, therapy, community, everything she'd never had. The contracts were signed in April. By May, the first batches of Compound 73 were being produced in certified labs in Kenya, India, and Costa Rica, places where manufacturing costs were low but quality control was rigorous. By June, the first treatments were being administered, and Maya was there to see it. The clinic was in a suburb outside Philadelphia, a clean, bright building that served primarily low-income families. Maya walked in with Sarah and Grace, all three of them nervous, hopeful, terrified. They were led to a treatment room where a little girl sat in a chair too big for her, an IV in her arm, her mother holding her hand. The girl was 5 years old. Her name was Lily, and she had maybe 2 months to live before Maya's cure. Dr. Chen, no relation to Maya, was administering the treatment. She looked up when they entered. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming. Lily, this is the young woman I told you about, the one who found the medicine that's going to make you better." Lily looked at Maya with huge brown eyes, too tired and too old for a 5-year-old. "You found it in a hospital?" Maya knelt beside her chair. "I did, in a secret room underground. Your medicine was hidden there for a long time, waiting for someone to find it." "Like treasure?" Maya's throat tightened. "Yeah, like treasure." The infusion took 45 minutes. Maya stayed the entire time, holding Lily's other hand, talking about everything and nothing, cartoons and favorite colors and whether unicorns were better than dragons. Normal things. Kid things. Things Lily should have been thinking about instead of death. When the infusion finished, Lily's mother, tears streaming down her face, pulled Maya into a hug so fierce it hurt. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me my daughter back." Maya couldn't speak, could only nod and hold on and try not to break down completely. Because this was why she'd fought. This moment right here. This mother and this child and this chance at life that had almost been stolen from them forever. Over the next 3 months, 700 children received Compound 73. 700. In clinics across the United States, Kenya, India, Brazil, Thailand, and a dozen other countries. The results were extraordinary. Remission rates matched Dr. Khalil's original trials. Children who'd been dying were stabilizing, improving, living. Families who'd been preparing funerals were planning birthdays instead. The media coverage was relentless. Maya's face was everywhere again, but the tone had shifted. She wasn't a whistleblower anymore. She was a hero. Time magazine put her on their cover, the girl who saved thousands. The New York Times ran a feature, How One Foster Kid Exposed Pharmaceutical Corruption and Changed Medicine Forever. She was invited to speak at medical conferences, universities, and congressional hearings. But the attention that meant the most came from an unexpected place. Other foster youth started reaching out, hundreds of them. Kids who'd aged out like she had, who'd been left with nothing, who saw her story and realized they weren't alone. They shared their own stories of abandonment, struggle, and survival. They asked how she'd found the courage to fight. They wanted to know if things could get better. Maya read every message, and she started responding, not with platitudes or false hope, but with honesty. She told them it was hard, that survival wasn't pretty, that some days you didn't know if you'd make it, but that sometimes, impossibly, broken things could be fixed. That sometimes the world surprised you. That sometimes being left with nothing meant you had nothing to lose, and that made you dangerous in the best possible way. By September, Maya's royalty payments had reached $2 million. Not the $10 million Grayson had offered, but more than enough. She sat with Grace and Sarah and Emma Khalil, who'd become a close friend and advisor, and they planned. The foundation would be called Second Sunrise, named for the idea that some people needed more than one chance at dawn. It would provide housing, education, mental health services, and job training for foster youth aging out of the system. No strings attached, no judgments, just support. And the headquarters would be in the one place that made sense: Camden Falls Children's Hospital. The demolition had been permanently cancelled after the court case. The building sat empty, protected now as a historical site. But Maya didn't want it to be a museum gathering dust. She wanted it alive again, filled with voices and hope and second chances. She used $1 million to purchase the building from the city for $1, the rest going to renovations. The other $1 million went into the foundation's endowment, ensuring it could operate for years to come. And in November, almost exactly 1 year after she'd broken through that fence looking for shelter, she stood in front of the hospital with a crowd of hundreds, cutting a ribbon. The transformation was stunning. The exterior had been cleaned and repaired, the brick restored to its original deep red. The windows were replaced, gleaming in the autumn sun. Inside, the old patient rooms had been converted into apartments for aged-out foster youth. 40 units total, each with a bed, desk, kitchenette, and most importantly, privacy. The common areas held computer labs, study rooms, a library, a gym, and a kitchen where residents could learn to cook. But the most important part, the part Maya had insisted on, was the basement. The morgue where she'd found Dr. Khalil's cure had been converted into a memorial and educational center. The steel drawers remained, but now they held not vials but photographs and stories. Stories of the children who'd died from Harrington's syndrome. Stories of the children who'd been saved. And the story of Raymond Khalil, the doctor who'd given everything to make sure his daughter and thousands of others might live. His journals were displayed in glass cases. His letter, the one that had started everything, hung on the wall in a frame. And beside it, a photo of Maya at 8 years old, pulled from that corkboard, with a plaque beneath it that read, "Sometimes the forgotten remember what everyone else chose to ignore." The opening ceremony was emotional and chaotic. Jennifer Torres was there with her daughter Sophia, now healthy and running around with other children who'd received the cure. Emma Khalil spoke about her father, her voice breaking as she thanked Maya for honoring his legacy. Former foster youth who'd already moved into the apartments shared their stories, and Marcus Lynn, the journalist who'd helped expose Grayson, moderated a panel discussion about pharmaceutical ethics and medical access. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she stood at a podium that had been set up in the front lobby, looking out at the faces gathered there. Survivors, fighters, people who understood what it meant to be left behind and to claw your way back. She didn't have a prepared speech. She just spoke from the heart. "A year ago, I had nothing," she began. "No home, no family, no future I could see. I came back to this hospital because I was desperate, because I thought maybe I could hide here for a few nights until I figured something out. I wasn't looking for treasure or cures or justice. I was just looking for shelter." She paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "But what I found changed everything. Not just for me, but for thousands of children who were dying because powerful people decided profit was more important than lives. Dr. Raymond Khalil hid his cure in a morgue because he knew those powerful people would destroy it. And he was right. They tried, but they failed. Because sometimes the most powerless person in the room is actually the most dangerous." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "I was nobody, a foster kid who aged out, the kind of person society throws away. But I had something they didn't. I had nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you can risk everything." She looked at the foster youth in the crowd, the ones who'd moved into the apartments, the ones still struggling. "That's what I want you to understand. Your past doesn't define you. The system that failed you doesn't define you, you define you. And sometimes being broken, being forgotten, being left with nothing is exactly what makes you strong enough to change the world." The applause was thunderous. People stood, some crying, some cheering. Maya stepped down from the podium and was immediately surrounded by kids wanting to thank her, to hug her, to tell her their own stories. and she listened to every single one. Because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be told you didn't matter, and she wanted every single person in that building to know they mattered, that they were seen, that they were worth fighting for. Later that evening, after most people had gone home, Maya walked through the empty halls of the hospital. Grace had gone to check on the apartments. Sarah was in the memorial center, organizing some final displays. Emma had stayed to help. But Maya needed a moment alone. She walked to the old pediatric wing, the one where she'd spent so many years as a child. The walls were painted now, cheerful colors instead of institutional beige. The rooms were bright and welcoming, but she could still feel the ghosts of who she'd been. The scared little girl who didn't know if she'd survive. The teenager who'd been shuffled from home to home. The 19-year-old who'd broken in here with $47 and no plan beyond surviving one more night. She stopped in front of a room that had a plaque beside the door, the Sophie Chen Memorial Reading Room. Maya had named it after Sophie, the girl who'd drawn butterflies on ceiling tiles and died at 7 years old. Inside, bookshelves lined the walls, filled with novels and comics and poetry. Comfortable chairs sat near the windows. It was a place for kids to escape, to dream, to remember that even in the darkest times, stories could offer light. Maya walked to the window and looked out over the city. Lights twinkled in the distance. Somewhere out there, a child was receiving Compound 73. Somewhere, a family was celebrating a birthday they thought would never come. Somewhere, the cure that had been buried for 17 years was saving lives. And it was all because one forgotten girl had refused to stay forgotten. Her phone buzzed, a text from Grace. "Come to the morgue. There's something you need to see." Maya made her way downstairs, taking the same elevator she'd discovered a year ago. The doors opened onto the basement level, now well lit and clean. She walked to the memorial center and found Grace, Sarah, and Emma standing around something covered with a cloth. "What is this?" Maya asked. Emma smiled, tears in her eyes. "We wanted to surprise you. It arrived this afternoon." They pulled back the cloth, revealing a bronze statue. It showed a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, kneeling beside an open morgue drawer, flashlight in hand, face full of wonder and determination. The detail was extraordinary. You could see the frayed edges of her jacket, the cracked screen of her phone, the backpack at her feet, and on the base, an inscription, Maya Chen. She looked for shelter and found hope. She expected nothing and changed everything. Maya couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. She reached out and touched the bronze face, so perfectly captured it was like looking at a reflection of her younger self. "I don't deserve this," she finally whispered. "Yes, you do," Emma said firmly. "My father died believing his work would never see the light, that he'd failed. You proved him wrong. You gave meaning to his sacrifice. You gave life to his legacy. If anyone deserves to be immortalized, it's you." Maya turned to look at the 3 women who'd stood beside her through everything. Grace, who'd been the first person to believe in her. Sarah, who'd risked her career to verify the cure. Emma, who'd carried her father's secret for 17 years and had finally found peace. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Maya said. "All of you." "That's the point," Grace said gently. "None of us can do anything alone, but together we can move mountains." Over the next year, Second Sunrise grew beyond anything Maya had imagined. The 40 apartments stayed full, housing aged-out foster youth from across the region. The job training programs placed 82% of participants in permanent employment. The mental health services helped kids process trauma they'd been carrying alone for years. And the community that formed within those walls became a family for people who'd never had one. Maya moved into one of the apartments herself, a small unit on the 3rd floor overlooking the street. She enrolled in community college, studying social work, wanting to formalize the education she'd gotten from lived experience. She still gave interviews, still spoke at conferences, still fought for medical access and foster care reform. But she also worked at Second Sunrise, mentoring new residents, teaching life skills classes, and making sure everyone who walked through those doors knew they were home. Compound 73 became the standard treatment for Harrington syndrome worldwide. By the end of the second year, over 3,000 children had received it. The survival rate held steady at 87%. Thousands of lives saved. Thousands of families spared the grief that had consumed Raymond Khalil. And the formula remained public domain, available to any manufacturer, preventing any single company from controlling access or price. Grayson Pharmaceuticals settled the criminal case for $750 million, paid out to families who'd lost children to Harrington syndrome while the company suppressed the cure. The executives who'd written those damning emails faced federal charges. The CEO went to prison for 3 years. The company's reputation never recovered. Within 5 years, they'd been broken up and sold to competitors. But the real victory wasn't in punishing Grayson. It was in the children who lived. Maya kept photos of them on her wall. Lily, the first child treated, now 8 years old and obsessed with dinosaurs. Sophia Torres, healthy and thriving, who wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. Marcus Chen, no relation, who'd been in the original trials as a child and was now a young man studying biochemistry, hoping to follow in Dr. Khalil's footsteps. And on the anniversary of the day she'd broken into the hospital, Maya stood once again in the memorial center. Hundreds of people had come for the commemoration. Families whose children had been saved. Former foster youth who'd found homes at Second Sunrise. Medical professionals who'd helped manufacture and distribute the cure. Journalists who'd told the story. And standing in the center of it all, Maya looked at the bronze statue of her younger self and realized something profound. She hadn't just found a cure. She'd found herself. The scared little girl who'd thought she was worthless had discovered she was priceless. The teenager who'd been thrown away had proven she was irreplaceable. The young woman who'd had nothing had given everything. And in doing so, she'd shown the world that sometimes the people society forgets are the ones who remember what matters most. Hope, justice, the belief that every life has value, that children deserve to live, that truth is worth fighting for even when the cost is everything. As the ceremony ended and people began to leave, Emma approached Maya and handed her an envelope. "This came for you last week. I thought you should open it today." Maya opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from the Nobel Prize Committee. She'd been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for her work exposing pharmaceutical corruption and ensuring medical access for vulnerable populations. Whether she won didn't matter. The nomination itself was recognition that what she'd done had changed the world. She folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. Then she looked around the memorial center, at the photos of smiling children, at the display cases holding Dr. Khalil's journals, at the statue of a girl with nothing but a flashlight and hope. "We did it," she whispered to the empty air, to the memory of Raymond Khalil, to Sophie and all the children on that corkboard who never got their chance. "We did it." And somewhere in the universe, she believed they heard her. That night, Maya stood on the roof of Second Sunrise, looking out over Camden Falls. The city lights stretched to the horizon, each one representing a life, a story, a chance. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and the loss, the fear and the fight, the moments she'd wanted to give up and the moments she'd found strength she didn't know she had. She'd started with nothing. $47 and a backpack. No family, no future. Just desperation and the will to survive one more day. And somehow, that nothing had become everything. A cure that saved thousands, a foundation that caught the falling, a legacy that would outlive her, because sometimes the girl with nothing to lose is the one who has everything to give. Maya pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. She'd been writing her own story, not for fame or money, but because she wanted other kids like her to know it was possible. To know that your beginning doesn't determine your ending. That being broken doesn't mean being worthless. That sometimes the darkest places hold the brightest treasures. She typed one final line. "I was 19, homeless, and breaking into an abandoned hospital just to survive. But when I opened that morgue drawer, I didn't just find a cure worth $300 million. I found proof that sometimes the most powerless person in the room can change the world. And if I could do it, so can you. She saved the note and looked up at the stars. Tomorrow, more children would receive Compound 73. More families would celebrate miracles. More foster youth would move into Second Sunrise and start building the futures they'd been told were impossible. The work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. But it was happening, and that was enough. 3 years later, Maya stood in that same spot on the roof, but she wasn't alone anymore. Beside her was a young woman named Ava, 17 years old, who'd just aged out of foster care and moved into Second Sunrise 2 weeks ago. Ava reminded Maya of herself, all sharp edges and distrust, waiting for the world to hurt her again. But tonight, something had shifted. Ava had smiled at dinner, had laughed at a joke one of the other residents told, had started to believe just maybe that this place was real. "You really did all this?" Ava asked, looking out over the city. "Built this whole place from nothing?" Maya smiled. Not from nothing. From $47 and a backpack full of anger, and a lot of help from people who believed when I couldn't. Ava was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't know what I want to do yet. I don't know who I'm supposed to be." "You don't have to know," Maya said gently. "I didn't know either. I just knew I wanted to survive. And then I wanted others to survive too. The rest figured itself out." "What if I mess up? What if I can't do it?" Maya turned to face her. "Then you get back up and try again. That's all any of us can do. But here's what I learned. Being broken doesn't make you weak. It makes you someone who understands that broken things can be fixed. And that understanding, that's power." Ava nodded slowly, something like hope flickering in her eyes. And Maya knew that this, right here, was why she'd fought. Not just for the cure, not just for Dr. Khalil's legacy, but for moments like this, for kids like Ava who needed someone to believe in them until they could believe in themselves. The next morning, Maya received a call from Dr. Amara Osei. The Global Medical Ethics Foundation had just treated their 10,000th child with Compound 73. 10,000. The number felt impossible, miraculous. 10,000 children who would grow up, go to school, fall in love, have dreams, live lives they'd been told they'd never have. "We want to do something to mark this milestone," Amara said. "A global event. Bring together families, medical professionals, survivors. Show the world what's possible when we choose people over profit. And we want you to be the keynote speaker." Maya's first instinct was to say no. She'd done enough public speaking. She wanted to focus on Second Sunrise, on the kids who needed her here. But then she thought about all the families who'd never heard of Harrington's syndrome, who had no idea this cure existed. About the other diseases that still needed advocates, still needed people willing to fight pharmaceutical corruption. "I'll do it," she said. "But only if we include the voices of the children themselves, the survivors. They're the real story." The event was held 6 months later in New York City, Madison Square Garden, filled to capacity with 20,000 people. Maya stood backstage, watching monitors as child after child walked onto the stage, healthy and beaming, sharing their stories of survival. Some had been treated 3 years ago, others just months ago, but they were all alive, all thriving, all proof that Dr. Khalil's dream had come true. When it was Maya's turn, she walked out to thunderous applause. The lights were blinding, the crowd overwhelming. But she focused on the faces she could see in the front rows. Lily, now 10 years old, sitting with her mother. Sophia Torres, who just started medical school at age 18, determined to help other children like herself. Emma Khalil, her father's legacy, finally honored the way it should have been 17 years ago. Maya spoke for 20 minutes. She told them about the abandoned hospital, the hidden morgue, the moment she'd opened that first drawer and found something impossible. She talked about Dr. Khalil's sacrifice, about the pharmaceutical industry's greed, about the power of refusing to accept that children should die for profit margins. And she ended with a challenge. This cure exists because one man refused to give up, and because a broken system tried to bury him and failed. But there are other cures out there. Other breakthroughs sitting in labs, hidden in research papers, suppressed because they threaten the wrong people's bottom line. We can't let that continue. We have to demand better. We have to fight for a world where medicine serves people, not shareholders. Where no parent has to watch their child die because someone decided profit mattered more than life. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes, and when it finally ended, when Maya walked off that stage, she knew this was just the beginning. The fight wasn't over, it would never be over, but now she wasn't fighting alone. Now she had an army of survivors, families, advocates, and people who'd seen what was possible when one person refused to stay silent. Because Maya Chen had spent her entire life being powerless. And then she'd discovered that sometimes the most powerless person in the room is actually the most dangerous. Because they have nothing to lose, nothing to protect, nothing stopping them from telling the truth, no matter how much it costs. Anyone can change the world if they're brave enough to open the doors everyone else was too afraid to touch. As the sun rose over Camden Falls Children's Hospital 2 years after Maya had first broken through that fence, she stood in what had once been the morgue and was now a thriving educational center, watching a new generation of medical students learn about Dr. Raymond Khalil's work. They would carry his legacy forward. They would remember that medicine was supposed to save lives, not profits. They would be the doctors who said no to corruption and yes to the children who needed them. And they would do it because one 19-year-old girl had refused to walk away when the world told her she didn't matter. She had proven that the forgotten can change history, that broken things can be made whole, that sometimes shelter isn't just a roof over your head, it's the courage to believe you deserve more than survival. Because for Maya, and for every child who would live because of what she found, the story wasn't about treasure or money or revenge. It was about proving that every life has value. Every child deserves a chance. And sometimes, the most important discoveries are made by the people everyone else decided didn't matter. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories that prove courage can come from the most unexpected places. Click to keep discovering with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe the forgotten hold the keys to our future.